family are, we've packed our bags, we've gone to this lake, we're going to go fishing, right? And the complication of my story is we sit there at the lake with our fishing rods for half an hour, and maybe not even half, like 3 hours, and we catch no fish, right? And the complication is us being impatient and upset that we've gone all this way and yet we still can't get anything, right? At the end of the story, like just before we're ready to pack our bags and go home without any fish, I catch a huge salmon or a huge bass, right? A really big fish, and we're all ecstatic, and then the story ends. What was the theme of that story, right? So the theme of that story is not the fact that, we've gone fishing. Fishing is not the theme, right? The theme instead might be like the idea of reward, the idea of, patience, and how if you wait long enough, good things will happen, right? Patience and reward, those are our two themes. Okay. All right, so yes, our basic definition of themes are the major concerns of a text, but themes are not simply the topic. All right, the topic of our text is not the same as our theme. Right? Fishing was a topic, but it's not the theme of that story. Right? So themes are hidden beneath the events and the conversations of a text. So oftentimes it's not that obvious, right? But subconsciously, as we're reading a story, we will realize things that occur often. Some sort of ideas that run throughout the story, some kind of character traits, those make up our theme. Yeah. So themes tend to be intangible. So think about, our abstract nouns, and they give the story greater meaning and influence. All right, so how do we identify those themes? All right, we identify those themes from making inferences and linking recurring motifs. So what are recurring motifs? Things that, come up again and again in the story and have some sort of extra symbolic meaning, right? Think about very common text. I'm sure most of you guys will have read Harry Potter, or at least watched the movies. We know that there's these themes of power, of courage and bravery, right? But no time during the story we see this chapter is about courage, this chapter is about power, right? It's none of that. We get those ideas through the interactions that the characters have with the environment, with the setting, with other characters, and with the events of the story. So themes are really important for us to kind of understand and identify, because as they go through and analyze text in English, we need to be able to pick these out so that we can construct a meaningful and insightful topic sentence or thesis or paragraph, right? Because the idea of an essay is to present some sort of argument, right? So to present your interpretation of the text and how that aligns with the question or doesn't align with the question through our manipulation of our language, the techniques, the quotes, and the ideas in the story. Right? If I was going to write an essay in Macbeth, and I say Macbeth is about this character Macbeth, he wants to be king, has this prophecy to be king, he gets it and then he dies, full stop, end of essay. I'm going to get 0 out of 20. That has no meaning whatsoever, right? But for those of you who have looked at Macbeth, studied Macbeth already, we know that there's themes of morality, of corruption, of power, of ambition. That's what's going to drive your argument and what's going to make sure that your paragraph stands out from other people's and actually carry some deeper meaning. Okay, so we're going to be looking at a short extract. I might share my screen, but also talk through the text as well, so everyone knows like what's happening. All right, so all right. Hopefully some of you guys have seen this or read this before. Otherwise, we'll follow. I'll go through it as a summary. Yeah, so that means the theme would be like the theme of Hamlet is revenge is bad or something. Yeah. So the theme we'll look at what revenge is and like how that affects us, affects the characters, or whether or not it has consequences or benefits. Yeah. So in layman's terms, yes, it would be something like revenge is bad. Yeah, but obviously a bit more sophisticated than that. All right. Okay, so basically in our story we have this character, so it's a poor man and he's got a daughter, but they come from like a poorer family. Right, so this is in the era of kings and queens and monarchies. Right. So he has this poor man, he's a miller, so he grains he grinds grains, and he approaches the king and he tells the king, hey, I've got this daughter and she can actually spin straw, like hay, into gold. And obviously, we know how the king's going to react. He's going to be like, oh, please give me that daughter. I want that gold, right? Which is exactly what he does. Right, so the king, wants that daughter to come in, into his castle and spin the straw into spin the straw into gold, right? So he gets her, locks her into a room and goes, all right, if you don't spin me some gold, I'm going to kill you. Which is a very, quite a harsh thing to say. I'm sure not a pleasant interaction, right? So the girl's like in the locked room. She's like, oh my God, I'm so scared. Like, what's going to happen? I don't know how to spin straw into gold. Like, you can't do that. That's impossible, right? But then a strange little man walks into the room and goes, hi, I can help you. Like, I can turn this straw into gold, but you need to give me something. And he goes, I want your necklace. Right, so he goes, I want your necklace. Give me a necklace and I'll, exchange, spin the straw into gold. And the little girl's like, of course, let me give you my necklace. Right, of course I want that. So she gives him her necklace, and then the little man works his magic and turns it into gold. Right, so then when the king comes back, he's like, oh my gosh, wow, you're amazing. I want more gold. This is not enough. Right, now that I know you've got this power, I'm gonna, exploit you for as long as I can, make me more gold. Right, so he puts her into a bigger room. So, there's more space, more straw, and more room for gold to kind of, appear and be spit out. Right. So now the king goes, all right, I need you to give me your ring. Right. I want, he basically tries to take everything from this, told the story in the wrong order. The little man appears again. The little man goes, I want you to give me your ring. Right, give me your ring and I'll spin this more, straw into gold. And the little girl's like, all right, well, I've got no option. I'm going to give you everything, right? This happens a few times. And lastly, the very last time, the king goes, the king's looked at all of this gold that the little girl had supposedly made, and he's, ecstatic, right? Because he's going to be filthy rich. He's got all of this gold for pretty much pennies, because hay doesn't cost much, right? And he goes, if you do this one last time, spin everything in this room into gold, I'm going to marry you. So basically, this is, a fairy tale, very weird for an old king to marry, a young girl, but we'll look past that. So he goes, I'm going to marry you. And the girl obviously she doesn't got a choice, because otherwise if she doesn't spin the gold, she's going to get killed. So she's like, okay, I'll do it. And the last time, the little man appears again. The little man appears, and this time he doesn't want any material things. He doesn't want her bracelet or her ring, because she's already given that to him. Right? The little man goes, I want your firstborn baby. I want your child. And the girl's like, well, what option do I have? Right? She has to give him the baby. Otherwise, she's not going to be able to spin that straw into gold. She's going to get beheaded. It's not going to end well for anyone. So she begrudgingly agrees. Like, you know what? I'll give you my firstborn baby. So the little man works his magic, spins out all of the gold, and, bada bing, bada boom, they get married. The king and the girl get married. They have a child. They're all like, living happily ever after. But the little man appears one more time. Right, the little man appears and goes, hey, like, you promised me your firstborn baby. I'm here to collect. And, obviously, she's now a mother. She's given birth. She's got a strong emotional attachment to the child. She's not willing to give up the baby without a fight. Right? Even though she made, a promising deal, she's not going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, no worries. Have my child. Right? That's a bit of an irresponsible thing for her to do. So the little man proposes a question. Right? He goes, you know what? If you can guess my name, then I won't take your baby. But if you can't guess my name, baby's not mine. And throughout all of the interactions with, between the little man and the girl, he's never shared his name. She doesn't know what his name is. So now she's kind of panicking, because she's like, oh no, what am I going to do? How am I going to find this name? But don't forget, she's married the king. She's now the queen. So she's in a position of power as well. She has power and influence. So what she does is she hires a few messenger boys and goes, listen, I need you to collect a list of all the possible names, in the world. so that when that man comes back, I can just read off a list of names and surely I'll hit one of them, right? So she sends off her messenger boys and they go out and try to find as many names as they possibly can. Right? And they come up with all those generic names like Matthew, David, John, James, etc. And at the very end, just before the little man arrives to collect the baby, one messenger boy, he's out in the hills, he's out in like the fields, and he sees a little man kind of bouncing and trotting about, and the little man is singing some song about how he's going to have all of these things and he's going to finally get the queen's firstborn baby. Right? So that's the magic words. The messenger boy hears this little man sing the song, listens to what he's saying. The little man says his name, right? Because at the end of his song, he says, my name is his name. So the messenger boy takes that information, runs back to the queen and tells the queen this information. So now the little man comes to collect the firstborn baby, right? And they're in the castle and, the queen goes, she tries to, feign innocence, tries to play it cool a little bit. Like, oh, is your name Michael? And he's like, no, it's not. Is your name John? And he's like, no, it's not John either. So, the little man's feeling pretty good about himself. He knows he's going to get that baby because obviously, how would the queen have any clue what his name is? They've never talked about his name. Right, but lastly, the queen goes, is your name Rumpelstiltskin? And at that point, the little man's been done. Right? She knows his real name. What is he going to do? Right? He can't do anything. So he throws a huge fit. He gets super angry. He stomps his feet on the ground. And with one last stomp, he stomps so hard that he splits his body into two. And he basically dies. And that's the end of the story. Right? Not the, I think it's a pretty strange story. Definitely not something that you, would think of, as you're daydreaming. But yeah, that's our story. Right? So this is our little fella. He's a reincarnation from, I think, one of the Shrek movies. He was one of the villains in a Shrek movie. So we've got this funky looking fella here. And, we're turning the straw into gold. All right, hopefully, Shrek 4, thank you, yes. All right, hopefully we all followed along with that story. If not, if you want to read the story properly, there's a couple of renditions because it is a very old Grimm's fairy tale. You'll find a couple of different versions online. If you just search up, Rumpelstiltskin PDF, you'll find some kind of version there. All right, but remember today we're looking at themes, right? So we can't get too carried away with the story. We're going to look at what were the themes of that story. So before we talk about themes, let's first talk about what were not the themes. What were some topics in that story? So I think here we have an option to put your hand up. So if you guys want to, or if there's no option to put your hand up, you can just type it in the chat and I can just read out your answers. So what were some things that were topics but not themes? To think about that story I said earlier about fishing, how fishing itself was not a theme, catching salmon was not a theme. What are some topics that are not themes in Rumpelstiltskin? Theft? Yep, theft is not a theme. What else? Straw to gold? Exactly. That's not a theme. We can hold those things. They're tangible. Surely they're not themes, right? Gold is not a theme. Anything else? Babies? Yeah, babies not a theme. Magic? I wouldn't call magic a theme in this story, perhaps. Ugly guy? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this funky looking fella? Definitely not a theme. Kings marrying young girls, also not a theme. So many things are not themes, right? Split bodies. Promises. Okay, promises we'll come back to because promises I wouldn't say necessarily is a topic because with our themes, remember, we want to attain some greater message to them. All right, yeah, broken wood, the woods. The queen sort of stole the baby from the little guy. Yeah, well, I mean, they did have a deal. I think it was just a very sly deal. She kind of, I don't think she would steal it. I don't think she stole the baby because realistically, Rumpelstiltskin could have just not said, if you can guess my name, you can keep the baby. If he just shut his mouth, then obviously he would get the baby at the end. Yeah, awesome. All right, so what were the themes? So not themes, gold, straw, theft, kings marry people, right? So our real themes are, we're looking at this idea of greed and power. All right, so going back to our earlier slide and thinking about what a theme is, right? So our major concern of the text. With those concerns of our text, we have a greater meaning, right? At no point in that text in my retelling of the story, did I say the words power or did I say the word greed? I don't think, right? Those ideas are things we get almost subconsciously, right? Well, we think about, well, where does the idea of greed come from? Well, it comes from, you know, the king, right? The king wants this little girl to spin all this straw into gold. Why? He wants more gold. He wants more money, right? Why would he want more gold? Why would he want more money? Greed, right? One of the 7 sins of, you know, humans, right? We always want more than we, you know, have. Would luck be a theme? So where would luck come from? It's like, where in the story did we get luck from? The delivery man guy. So do you mean like the fact that the little man was able to spin the straw into gold? You guys can unmute yourself. I'm asking you a question, so you're welcome to unmute yourself and just answer me if your typing is too bothersome. Oh no, he found the. Oh, okay. So the luck of the messenger boy, he was able to hear the name by chance. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't actually think of that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say. I definitely think that is an idea in the story, but I wouldn't call it a major concern. If anything, it would be quite minor. It's a very small portion of the story. Most of the story, we're still looking at these ideas of greed and power, right? So not only is the king in a position of power, the little man, Rumpelstiltskin, is also in a position of power because he's the one who's demanding all of these things from the girl just because he knows that she has to forfeit. Patience? Why patience? I think manipulation definitely, but why patience actually? In the version I heard, the guy went to look for Rumpelstiltskin and had found a 4-leaf clover. Yeah, so it's a very old fairy tale. There's hundreds of different reiterations of it. I'm sure the story I told might not be the same as the one you heard. Yeah, but the main ideas are still the same, right? Because if she didn't wait, she wouldn't have got the baby back. Oh, okay. So you're talking about later on when, you know, Rumpelstiltskin comes to claim the baby. Yeah, okay, sure. I think similar to luck, I would say that's more of a minor theme because that just comes at the very end because patience is not really applicable to the first and the major part of the story. But definitely an idea. Definitely, you know, a minor theme. Yeah. All right. Okay, so think back to the work you've been doing these past few years, whether or not, yeah, because I know there's a couple of you guys who are younger in this class who might not have done a lot of analytical reading or, you know, English yet, high school English yet, that's fine, right? But think about, you know, stories that you've read, right? So we've identified the 2 main themes in the story. We said greed and power, right? How do we, you know, actually analyze this theme? So we've pinpointed the theme itself, but how do we go one step further? Right, so yeah, he has greed and the king also had greed, exactly. Right, so we want to construct a message or some sort of, you know, topic sentence based around this theme. So how do we go about doing that? Right, so think about all the topic sentences that you've written so far. What do we have in our topic sentence? Pretty much always. We always have, so maybe think about, you know, how would we answer an explain question? What do we always need? Cause and effect. Yes, thank you. Right, we want some sort of cause and effect because without cause and effect, there's not really much of a purpose. I can't just say love is bad or love is good because that doesn't mean anything. Why is love bad? Why is love good? Right? We must have some sort of cause and effect to kind of link our ideas together, have some sort of, you know, benefit or detriment or consequence that, you know, links our themes and the events of the story, everything all together. Exactly. Right. So half of the work is pinpointing what the theme is, but I think the harder part is actually understanding how to kind of construct a message out of that theme. So because our themes are, you know, abstract, intangible things, they can be interpreted in, you know, an infinitude of ways, right? When I say the word love, love can mean so many different things. If I say the word greed, greed can mean a lot of things as well, right? It doesn't always have to be greed for money, you know, greed for power, greed for food, greed for influence, greed for, you know, better reputation, can be almost anything too, right? So a good topic sentence will be specific. You know, it's going to actually identify the theme and a clear point of the text in an insightful way, right? So as I said earlier, greed is bad. That's bad. We don't want to do that. We want to look at something specific about our text and actually apply it to our theme, right? Same goes with power. All right, so let me just go. All right, so we want some sort of cause and effect. So identify the cause and effect. So let's first define what greed and power are. Okay, so greed is a selfish, intense desire for something more. Right? Something is a very general word. Something can be anything, right? Whenever we reconstruct our topic sentence or our thesis, we want to be as specific as possible without kind of closing ourselves up to other, points of analysis. So you don't want to say greed is something, greed is a selfish desire for something more. You don't want to say an intense desire for, beating another person in a race. That's too specific, right? Keep it general enough that we can actually apply analysis later, but also specific enough so that we're not just writing some kind of random blob of words on a page. All right, we've defined greed. Right? So obviously, depending on the text, we can analyze greed in a multitude of ways. Right? Typically, we see greed as a negative emotion, which I feel like, yeah, it is generally a negative emotion. But there will be situations where we can apply greed in a positive light. Right? So I've got a sentence here for you guys. So greed distorts morals, pushing people to manipulate and lie. Right, so what is the cause of that sentence there? Can anyone say? Greed. Yeah, easy. What's the effect? Ooh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, distorted morals, and people manipulating and lying. Exactly. Yeah. All right. So this topic sentence here, we've got some sort of cause and effect, and I want to say it's like the closest link to our question there. So we'll work together now. Let's come up with a message that applies to Rumpelstiltskin a bit closer to this one here, because manipulate and lie, I feel like is only slightly applicable when we think about how Rumpelstiltskin kind of manipulated the girl, right? So let's have a think about that, the story that we just went through. How can we come up with some sort of message that's appropriate and actually links to the story? Yeah, the theme of the story is that greed can overwhelm people and ruin their morality and innocence, but in the end, good always wins. Yeah. So we have our cause, this idea that greed can overwhelm people and ruin, make them immoral, right? So here, it's pretty interesting. So not only are you saying that the people who are greedy are immoral, but also other people can be tainted by greed. Okay. But in the end, good always wins out. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because at the end of the story, right, instead of just forfeiting and giving, the Rumpelstiltskin the baby like the queen originally agreed to, she tries to hire other people to find out what the name is. She doesn't win on a fair basis, right? Because if she didn't have those messenger boys, if she wasn't in a position of power to have that influence, she definitely wouldn't have won, and she would have to give up the baby. Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. So obviously when we write our topic sentence, we want to be a bit more succinct, but the ideas there are great. Okay, so looking on to the next one, power. What is power? So power is the ability to influence and direct the behavior of others. Right? Again, a very general definition. So who's got the power here in this story? Who's got the power? Exactly, the king and the little man. So what's the king's power? To rule? To manipulate the little girl. That's what we're looking for. Yeah, his power over the girl, because he's got this influence, he's got this reputation. If he's also got the power to, kill this girl if she doesn't, obey him. Right? Obviously, he's kind of misusing his power there. Right? What's interesting about this story here is, even though the king is a greedy and powerful man, he never gets punished for his kind of immoral traits. Right? Because if you think about Rumpelstiltskin, yes, he is greedy, yes, he is power hungry, but at the end of the story, he dies. right? There's some sort of kind of reconciliation of that. But on the other hand, nothing really happens to the king. So what does that say? What does that kind of tell us? The little man also has something that the girl doesn't have, which gives him power. Yeah. No one opposes him. No one opposes who? The king. Yeah. The king is not asking for a thing in return, but he is though. He's asking the little girl, I keep saying little girl, I'm sure she's like of age, the girl to spin the straw into gold though. He wants the gold. He's getting the gold, right? He's getting benefited. The girl is making the gold. So the girl is making the straw into gold, but really the little man is doing that. No one knew about the little man apart from the king because he had the power to do everything. Okay. So what I was trying to get at was this idea that, oftentimes in stories, especially in Shakespeare, so those of you who have looked at Shakespeare, you'll know that, we have this idea of the hubris, people who are, greedy, power hungry, have inflated egos. At the end of the story, they die and they kind of recognize their faults at the very end. And it's a very cathartic and amazing moment. And then when they die, everyone's kind of relieved. Right? So think of Macbeth, right? In this story, we have Rumpelstiltskin, who is this greedy little man, and manipulates this young girl to give him everything that she's got, including her baby, just so that she can please the king, and he can help her do these things. Right? So yes, he is greedy. Yes, he is has power, and he misuses his power. Right? If the little man just is like, hey, I know you're stuck in a bind. Let me help you. I'm going to turn this straw into gold. You don't need to give me anything in return. Then obviously these things wouldn't be applicable. Right? The father was greedy as well. Yeah, good point. But at the end of the story, Rumpelstiltskin he kills himself, kind of. He stomps and he breaks himself in half. Right? There's some sort of vindication. Right? Even though he's done these bad things, at least he gets punished for it. But on the other hand, the king doesn't really get punished at all, at least in the version that we went through. Right? The king, kind of almost kidnaps this little girl, takes this girl, forces her to do these things under emotional distress, and he just gets a wife and a baby and a lot of gold. Right? He almost wins in the story. He's the true winner of the story, not the girl. Right? What does that teach us about greed, though? This idea that greed doesn't affect us equally. If you are in, a position of power, a position of granted power, like if you're born into a position of royalty, some of these immoral acts don't affect us as severely. Right? In comparison to this little man who doesn't, clearly is just, a bystander, someone who's quite low in the social class, as soon as he kind of steps out, is greedy and immoral, he gets punished for it. Right? So there are deeper layers that we can attain to this fairy tale. Yeah, hopefully everyone followed that. Yeah, so the father was greedy as well, definitely, right? Because he comes from a lower social class, didn't have that much money, and decided to kind of just sell his daughter away. Right? I guess he gets punished because, he loses his daughter. Yeah. All right, so looking at power now, so I've got this little sentence here. Power can arise differently, but ultimately is crucial in manipulating and changing people. So we've got a few layers here. Right, we have our cause and effect, which is power. Our cause leads to people manipulating and changing other people. But we've got this extra layer in there, which is the phrase, can arise differently. Right? And this is what helps us kind of stay specific to our text, right? Because in our text, the king's power and Rumpelstiltskin's power come from different places. One's from his ability to turn the straw into gold, and one is from his position of influence and actual power. All right, so it's saying here in this sentence, in this argument here, we're saying that it doesn't matter where your power comes from. Right? What matters is that it's always important and influential in changing other people and manipulating them or corrupting them. Okay. Yeah, so the more power you have, the less the rules apply to you. I think that's definitely an idea that we can attach to this particular text and the theme of power here. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I just want to see how that, even though that story was quite simple, like it's just a kid's story, a fairy tale that people read to their children at bedtime. There's so much more that we can actually add to that. Right? It's like that funny thing where like the curtains are blue, and then your English teacher tells you that, you know, they're blue because it's symbolizing his depression and sadness. But like, oftentimes in texts like these, we can actually apply, you know, deeper layers of meaning. Right? Couldn't the little man sell gold and get power like that? Yeah, he could, but instead he chooses to manipulate this young girl. Right? So maybe that's what makes him truly immoral. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Hopefully that clears some questions up about, you know, themes versus topics. Does anyone have any questions specifically about Rumpelstiltskin or anything else about like themes and messages? All right, when you say the theme, I think the theme here in this particular text, yes, that is a possible, you know, path for you to take, but I wouldn't say overall. Like overall, you know, without themes, they can be applied in any sort of way. There's so many ways you can interpret them. So don't kind of stick to one. Always good, power is always bad, greed is always bad, because it's not always true, right? Because if you think about here, the king's greed kind of made him the winner of this story. Would promises be a theme? So promises in this story here, I would say would be a very minor theme. I definitely wouldn't build an argument or an essay around the idea of promises because there's not too much that you can go off of. Because what is our cause and effect going to be for promises then? The idea that if you betray your promise, you get, you know, punished in the end. But that's not true, because even though the queen betrayed her promise, she didn't lose in the end, right? Yeah, so there are things, you know, smaller ideas that we can call themes, but make sure that, you know, whenever we kind of considering what to pick and write about, it's actually something that we can use, you know, with cause and effect to actually write about insightfully. Yeah, awesome. All right, let's move on. So the last thing we kind of want to look at is some common themes. All right, so we're going to go through 5 common themes that we're going to see often. We'll talk about some texts that do, you know, include these themes and some common messages that we have about these themes too. Okay, awesome. All right, so the first thing we're looking at is love. Love is a very general word. Love applies to many different things. Right? The love you feel for your family, the love you feel for your pet, love for, you know, you have for, you know, a romantic partner, etc. Right? Love for you know, your work, your passion, you know, etc. All right. So what are some common like messages with these themes? So we'll go through these texts first, and then we can kind of talk about like common messages as well. Does tragedy come after death? Yes. Under death? Yeah. So these themes here are quite general. Definitely, you know, smaller themes can come under them. You can be a bit more specific, etc. All right, so Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare. Shakespeare's going to come up a few times. All right, Mans did everything. You're going to be doing a lot of Shakespeare. If you don't like him, you better start liking him. Yeah. Honestly, Shakespeare does get a lot more enjoyable as soon as you realize like his intention and his purpose. So you feel like so far, like all the Shakespeare you've done is terrible, you don't like it, you know, there's a lot of movie interpretations. If you feel like reading it is very tiring, definitely go watch some movies, look at some other adaptations. He'll get interesting. All right, Romeo and Juliet, right? This idea of forbidden love, right? Those of you who know about Romeo and Juliet, you'll have some idea already. If you don't, that's okay as well. All right, so in Romeo and Juliet, we have this idea of forbidden love, this, you know, idea that like, you know, warring families, you can't interact, the idea of fate as this, you know, this ultimate decider and this, you know, power, right? So we've got these themes, these messages like, you know, forbidden love comes with terrible consequences, idea that love cannot overrun or overturn fate. Fate has the ultimate power, no matter how strong and how deep your love is, right? Right, so those messages there are quite general, but even then we still have some sort of cause and effect. On Prejudice, we're looking at, you know, romantic love for both of those texts, right? But specifically looking at, you know, in Pride and Prejudice, the idea of, you know, that love can grow over time as you, you know, learn and, you know, learn more about those people, and then slowly your own ideas and your attitudes can kind of morph and transform over time, right? This idea that love, can be a separate force from society, that you can conquer obstacles through love. Okay. Love is a very common theme. It's not one that you commonly write about though, because out of the 5 themes here, love would be like one of the more like one-dimensional ones. Right? It's not a really juicy thing that we spend a whole lot of time talking about. Yeah. All right, death. I'm not sure if anyone here has nodes of these 2 texts. You might be studying them later in high school. One-dimensional just means a little bit more kind of like less layered. It's not too deep. Yeah. Death is a huge thing. Yeah. So tragedy comes under death. Right. So I could have listed out pretty much every single Shakespeare play under death. Well, obviously we don't have time to talk about every single one of them. Right. The idea of loss. Right. Death is a very general term. Death kind of encompasses things like tragedy, loss, suffering, pain, etc. Right. In death, we get these themes such as, sacrifice leading to a noble death. This idea of, the grim reality of loss can kind of suck out and eat out your soul. The idea that, we can ultimately overcome, the loss and suffering of death through, the relationships we build with other people, right? Death is one of those themes that kind of goes hand in hand with something else as well, right? This idea of transformation or relationships or love as well. Okay. So both of those 2 texts are really great texts that kind of talk about death and what happens, to the people around us, what leads up to our death, how that affects us and how that changes the way we view things. Also, as I'm going through these texts, anything that you haven't heard of here, definitely recommend that you have a look online, see if it's something that you're interested in reading or watching, etc. All right, number 3, our favorite, power and corruption. All right. Actually, you know what? I want to let you guys have a go. I love how I should tell you, please unmute yourselves now, but everyone's just typing in the chat. That's fine. Yeah, so what are some messages that we can attach to power and corruption? Go. I want you guys to type up some messages for those kind of ideas. Power leads to corruption, sure, yeah, keep going. Okay, corruption is inevitable, it's bound to occur. An excess of power, that's better, yeah? An excess of power leads to corruption, because everyone has power, right? But not everyone ends up being corrupted. Can destroy morality and change and manipulate your personality, yeah. Don't just write Macbeth. I want to hear like the actual message. Macbeth itself is not a message. Okay. Anything else? I'm sure there's more that we can write. I'm seeing the words greed, corruption, power a lot. I want you guys to add an extra layer in. Power in the wrong hands could bring severe danger. Good. All good souls turn corrupt at the face of power. Wow, okay. That's a pretty strong statement to say. So you're saying that if someone gave you power, you would become a corrupt leader. Scary. Don't give this guy power. Power can be misused. Yeah. So a lot of what you guys are writing is great. Right. Definitely. We can add a lot more to those things as well. Right? Power can be misused. How? Why? Right. Whenever you write, a message like this, ask yourself why and how. See if you can add extra phrase or an extra statement at the end of that sentence, just to kind of amp it up and make it a bit more beefy. Misuse of power leads to mess in society and destroys the morality of each individual as well as a group. Yeah. Power can be used in a bad way and a good way. You're right, but what is the effect of that? So you've given us like the cause in an extra phrase, but what's the effect? Something that can influence people greatly. Yeah, influence people how? Influence in a good way or in a bad way, right? Try to be more specific. So ask yourself follow-up questions to kind of just like amp up that response. But yeah, so we've got some text here, 1984, Citizen Kane, King Lear, Macbeth, pretty much every other Shakespeare play as well. Yeah, power and corruption is a very common theme. So think about like everything we've done so far, there's nothing new. We're not learning what power is for the first time today, right? The things that we understand, kind of see in everyday life, so that these are themes that kind of will apply no matter where we are in history, no matter what kind of text type we're in, no matter what country or language we're reading in. Right? It doesn't matter. These transcend, those boundaries. Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, your responses are great. Awesome. All right, let's keep going. So number 4, looking at prejudice. Right, and I've kind of broken up prejudice into 3 different forms, but obviously there's more than just those 3. You can keep going. All right, so racial prejudice, you're looking at like Maya Angelou's poetry, you're looking at texts like To Kill a Mockingbird. All right, we're looking at these ideas that, societal norms, prejudice stems from what? What does that lead to? Right? Yeah. So, societal norms foster prejudice, right? And, it leads us to kind of hold unjust, opinions or beliefs, but ultimately through, like relationships and friendships, we can overturn prejudice, right? Something, that's just one message. There's so many messages that you can kind of attach to that. Right. Gender, Sylvia Plath's poetry. Those of you who've done that should know all about that already. Looking at like feminist movements, looking at gender equality, looking at the role of women throughout history and how a lot of female authors like Jane Austen, kind of manipulating and kind of playing with this idea of societal rules and beliefs and how we can overcome those things. Prejudice leads us to judge unfairly and is caused through classification of appearance. Yeah, the idea of appearance versus reality and how prejudice kind of overrules that. Yeah, so class, looking at texts like Pride and Prejudice, Vanity Fair, right? This idea that you can't overcome, in your current society, you almost can't overcome societal class barriers, right? But what does that teach? What does that teach us? What does that prevent us from doing? The different people according to money. Do you mean like how money can divide us? Is that what you're talking about? What's that movie where everyone is being watched and the higher power knows everything that's happening? What theme would that be? The thing that we do, I think you're talking about Metropolis? Animal Farm? Yeah, there's a lot of texts that kind of follow that plot line. That will come under oppression, so we'll talk about that next. But also under power and corruption. Right, so yeah, these, you can't really separate themes entirely. There's always going to be some sort of overlap and like something that we can kind of attribute. Prejudice enables one to form a social group of power caused by the segregation between people based on race, gender, or class. You've given me a definition. What's the effect of that? So you've given a really good definition of what prejudice is. Right, but if you think about our text and how we can actually analyze that in a proper like response, we haven't really given it an effect or anything that we can make a bit more specific. Right? So think about the stories and books that you've read, right? They will, prejudice is a pretty common theme, right? It's not always black and white. It's not always about race. It's not always about gender or class. There's also like other things can come out. 1984, yeah. 1984, yeah. I would say more so about power, corruption, and oppression and autonomy. Yeah. Anyone want to add anything more to prejudice? Any more messages that we can kind of create under this theme? I'm not too familiar with Cat's Cradle. Chantal, do you want to go into a bit more detail about how that applies to prejudice? You're welcome to unmute yourself as well. Why don't you just unmute yourself? It saves the delay from you typing out your response frantically and making spelling mistakes. That's okay. Yeah, so All the texts that I've kind of given you here are texts that you will kind of come across later on in high school, like in later years or even now. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. Chantal's giving us a hot take on Avatar, in relation to Prejudice right now. Thank you. Yes. Honestly, if anyone's not watched it, Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's got a lot of great ideas. It's quite a mature text that's delivered in a cartoon, like presented for a child audience. But it's a great TV show if anyone's interested. Yeah. All right, last one. We'll talk about the last one there. Is it on Netflix? It is on Netflix. You can have a watch. It's very enjoyable. Highly recommend. Yeah, actually, no. I think all the ideas we've talked about, sorry, how do I go backwards? Love, death, power, corruption, prejudice, oppression, autonomy, all of those five themes we can actually see in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Actually, thank you, Chantal. A great kind of text to summarize today's seminar. Yeah. All right, so we'll talk about the last one. So oppression and autonomy. So can anyone tell me what autonomy is? Without Googling in a side tab. Dictatorship, I would say like the opposite of a dictatorship. Anyone? An individual government. A moral. So autonomy is, so we have our prefix auto. Auto means like self, like working by itself, like automatic, works by itself. Right, republic, hierarchy. I feel like we all did a quick Google search. In English, when we talk about autonomy, we talk about ourself. Oh, awesome. Someone's copied and pasted the entire definition. Yeah, so we're looking at this definition here. So the second dot point, right? This idea of freedom from external control or influence, right? To have autonomy means to have complete control over yourself. This idea of independence, right? Autonomy is a great kind of theme when we're looking at, I would say like 1800s, 1900s texts from Britain and Europe, like Jane Austen. She talks a lot about female autonomy. This idea that at that time women didn't have the right to vote, didn't have their own money, couldn't have their own property. Their whole identity was tied to their husband. Right, this idea that lack of autonomy. Yeah. So oppression and autonomy kind of go hand in hand, right? So what's oppression? What's oppression? Tyranny, suppression. So what's the difference between oppression and suppression? So here, yeah, I'll wait for anyone else to. When you have the rights to do whatever you want and you make the decisions of your life, not follow those of others, that's autonomy, kind of. But what about oppression? Yeah, so this idea of having being influenced or being kind of silenced by a higher power or higher authority. Right. So this last theme that we're talking about today kind of goes hand in hand with power and corruption. Right. So again, we have 1984, Fahrenheit 451, a lot of dystopic novels. Fahrenheit 451, 1984, Brave New World. They're all dystopic fiction. Right. They all have strong themes of independence, rioting against the greater, the individual against the world. Right. Think of like a lot of like young adult like fiction, things like the Hunger Games, Harry Potter. This idea of the individual or this good this group of good people against all the evil bad people. Right. Thinking about how yeah, things like having some sort of self-independence. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so what are some things we can attach to oppression and autonomy? Anyone? I hope you guys are all frantically typing. That is true, they are related to power, but remember when we construct our theme, our topic, like our sentence for our theme, we want to have some sort of cause and effect. Power can only occur when power is given, sorry, oppression can only occur when power is given out unfairly or unnecessarily. Yes, but what's our effect? Halfway there. I think that's a very good idea though. Oppression, I wouldn't say is like ruling other people. I think the term oppression implies like, it depends on the perspective. Right, so those of you who looked at Sylvia Plath's poetry, right, she was the oppressed. Ted Hughes and her father were the oppressor, right? And her, like, she expressed her own, like, you know, autonomy through her poetry, right? I wouldn't make it as black and white, like, you know, they're complete opposites, no. Yeah, you're looking at things like how, you know, autonomy can lead to personal growth. As soon as we're given the opportunity to kind of make our own decisions and lead our own lives, we're able to kind of transform and, you know, grow emotionally or spiritually. Right? This idea that, you know, overcoming oppression can lead to, you know, another, you know, personal growth, transformation, you know, overcoming adversity through, you know, autonomous actions, etc. Yeah. All right, so I think for the most part, like, all the texts that we've looked at in these two slides, are texts that you're going to come across later on in high school, more or less, yeah. So definitely recommend that you guys have a look at, you know, some of these texts. Have a think, you know, if you feel like themes has been your weaker point, and like, you know, whenever you're writing an essay, you're kind of always waiting for your teacher to tell you what the idea is, tell you what the theme is before you can actually construct your own response. Go back to some texts that you've done already in high school, or, you know, in your, you know, own reading time. And as you're reading through them again, think about, you know, what are some themes, what are the themes in this particular text, right? What are the major themes, right? How can I actually identify some sort of cause and effect, right? And those of you who don't do a lot of casual reading, this is your subtle hint to start doing some casual reading. You realize it's quite a rewarding experience, and you feel like the things that you learn in English are hugely applicable. Like, as you're reading through, you're going to be like, I know what technique this person's using and how that actually makes a difference, which sounds like a very nerdy thing to say, but it's true. These are classics. I'll say it's definitely like Romeo and Juliet, Great Gatsby, Pride and Prejudice, definitely classics. You know, 1984, Animal Farm. What else was there? Yeah, all the Shakespeare plays. Yeah, Brave New World definitely are classics. But, you know, these texts are not the only texts that look at love, death, power, corruption, etc. There's so many more. Pretty much every single text that you read, every story you read, no matter how big or small, no matter what audience they are for, there will be some underlying theme. Right, looking at like today when we looked at Rumpelstiltskin, right? It's a Grimm's fairy tale aimed towards like 6-year-old children. Yet we were able to identify greed and power as the two main themes, and how they're actually important and how they're very layered ideas. Yeah. Does anyone? I'm having like the chat. Having a look at the chat. Seems like some of you guys want some book recommendations. Short stories, yeah. I think Ray Bradbury, the guy who wrote Fahrenheit 451, has a lot of great short stories that you can have a look at. When it comes to like what books to read, I feel like the things that I enjoy will not necessarily be the things that you enjoy. So think about the, you know, your own hobbies. What do you like looking at when you're on the internet, right? Find things that kind of apply to you, things that you're interested in, so you're actually more likely to finish that book. Otherwise, you're never going to finish it. It's going to be a waste of your time. Yeah, so I think you guys got a book list, or like some of you guys got some recommendations from your tutors. Definitely go through those ones first, right? Because your tutors will know you best and will give you things that like you will actually read and enjoy. Yeah, so Anqi says, yeah, Roald Dahl, good. That's true. Yeah, don't focus on difficult classics. Definitely. There's definitely classics that I personally would never force myself to ever read because I cannot tolerate it first. Yeah. example would be Brave New World. If you like boring text, you can read Brave New World. Yeah, have a look online. Don't always feel like you have to buy a book. Have a look. You can definitely find like PDFs that you can read through. Yeah. What is the HSC seminar this afternoon about? I think you guys were given a timetable that you can have a look at, and I think that will tell you. Oh, it's tomorrow. Thank you. Yeah. There is a movie with the Great Gatsby. It's got Leonardo DiCaprio in it, so you want to have a look at that, definitely. Yeah. So hopefully everyone feels a bit more comfortable looking at themes, and it feels like they learned something, even if you just sat there behind your computer screen and played on your phone the whole time. Hopefully you absorbed something through osmosis. Is The Landlady by Roald Dahl is a good book. Yes. Some of you guys are giving like book recommendations. That's really good. Oh, awesome. That's good to hear. Yeah. So if you guys have no more questions, I'll stay on a bit longer. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask and feel too shy to ask in front of everyone. Oh, sorry, one more thing. There will be a worksheet that I'm assuming Anqi will send you through your email that you're going to give her. So go through that. It'll be pretty much everything that we went through today. If you feel like there was anything in the worksheet that you were like, oh, I don't really know what's happening here, there will be, like in next week's seminar, you can ask, and I'm happy to go through anything with you guys. Yeah, you're welcome.